So Jeff, if you were to ask your wife, what was the hardest thing about being a military spouse? You mentioned earlier the whole idea of, putting all the rocks in the rucksack. How did frame that up for me again? What did you call it? Putting the parental
Oh,
rocks in the rucksack?
yeah, she just has all the parental rocks in her rucksack, and I'm carrying a fanny pack over here. So she's the one carrying all the weight.
What would she, if she was on here right now, what would she tell us is the hardest thing about carrying that rucksack?
She'd probably say just the fact that you're essentially alone. In that journey, there's so much uncertainty about when you're leaving and for how long. I mean, she got 22 hours notice for one of these deployments that was 6 months long. There's just a lot of uncertainty around that. And so you don't know how long you're going to have to carry anything. So you can't trust that your partner is going to be there or be back in time. You can't really depend on me for anything because there's always a mission that trumps everything else. And you never know when I'm going to get that call again, going back to that backpack always being packed in that front closet, just in case you get that call in the middle of the night, which did come several times. And yeah, I think that's really what she would say is just being alone and not a partner in this thing. So she was essentially a single parent for several years, especially when you're in those types of units.
So that's not a real common thing for, even militarily. Most of the time, most units know a good bit ahead of time, even in a wartime situation, when they're going to rotate in and out. Right. Being in the special operations community, you didn't have that luxury. But it's not just all special operations community. Even a lot of the special ops community has the ability to know their schedule, at least to a degree. What did you do in the special operations community that put you on that path where you always had to keep that pack ready to go?
No, it's a great question. So I had started off my military time as an enlisted guy in the reconnaissance stuff. I enlisted as a scout, and then later when I commissioned, my initial officer time was as an infantry officer, but I wasn't in that all that long before I transitioned to the intelligence side of the house. And so on the intelligence side, you're just number one, you're in short supply. They can't really ever get enough of you. And then when you start to kind of get a little bit of a feel for the community and you see that that you're a good fit. Not everybody's a really good fit with that, and it's no fault of their own. It's just a very it's a very unique community, and so when they find one that they like, they don't typically let go of that type of person. And I just happen to be that type of guy, and so it was just a natural fit. I probably would have been a miserable failure in the conventional Army any longer than what I was. I just kind of liked the ambiguity of the environment, but it came at a cost, and there's just a level of uncertainty. And so, yeah, that's just kind of what you deal with because you're supporting all the guys. The people that you're talking about that have the predictability in that community, they are on the operations side of the house. So I know I'm going to be on, and then I know when I'm going to be off. On a support side, where you're a logistics or an intelligence guy or some sort of a support mechanism like that, you end up supporting all the guys when they go, no matter where. And so it can create a hamster wheel cycle that you seem to be running in for a long time.
So I'm talking to Jeff Chase, Carry the Load ambassador, former Army special forces guy, special forces dude. Just retired after 23 years in the Army, not even a year out, 4 kids during that time, 19 years of marriage, countless 11 deployments, some for a 3-month window, some for much longer. Some you had plenty of time to know you're leaving. Some you had less than 24 hours to take action. And so the hardest part of all of this from your wife's perspective was doing it alone. What about for you? And I'm not talking about difficulty as it related to, what you were doing out there, the physical, mental or emotional strain in a combat scenario. What about from a home perspective? What were the difficulties there?
Well, first, just to make sure I don't get on the wrong side of a lot of my my soft colleagues or whatever, I was the intel guy. I was definitely not the special operations or special forces officer. So I know some of them will be listening for that. But Todd, I think that the most important thing for that and where I felt most disconnected was just or felt most challenged was being disconnected from home. You know, when you get a chance to make a phone call home and you're catching up on what's going there. First of all, that conversation is because there's only so many things you can talk about. And that's, you know, some of that's me going, you know, just not going into details about what my daily thing is, but largely there's a limited time and there's only so many things I can affect. So therefore there's only so many things that she's going to want to tell you about, because why tell you if you can't be part of her solution? And so that knowing how disconnected you were, I think over each of the trips, I figured out a little bit more just how much I wasn't hearing. And it was just because I couldn't help and she knew it. And so over the years, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, she just got better at dealing with it without me. And so that's needed to survive. So it's absolutely a survival instinct, but there is a day when you have to figure that out and you have to come home and you have to figure out how to jump back in the mix and be a part of the family again. And I think the hardest part was realizing this is getting bigger and bigger and there's just more and more to unpack and none of it's going away. It's just building on itself, but it's not going to stop until I get out of this section of my career, this assignment or these units or whatnot. And knowing that was hard because you couldn't help her. And you try to be connected and you try to build in predictability where you can, but there's only so much you can do with that. And
yeah, I mean, as guys, we're, you know, especially, you know, guys that come out of, you know, combat groups, you know, whether you're in direct support of it or, you know, pulling a trigger, you're inclined to want to fix things. You know, oh, there's a problem, let me fix it.
absolutely.
Oh, there's a problem, let me find a solution. And what I'm hearing you say is that she just realized she got to a point where she said, you know what, there's nothing you can do to fix it. You probably, I'm assuming you came to that conclusion at some point. You know, hey, you're doing a great job. I'm your cheerleader, but there's nothing I can do to fix it. I'm not going to try and fix it, but that's got to be hard because it's still your family.
Well, it's exceptionally hard. And, you know, you've made this promise to your teammate that you're going to be there no matter what, but then there's this other team that's overseas that you also can't let down. And you've sworn this ultimate allegiance to both and you don't want to let either one fail. But in that moment, you've been called to do something that kind of trumps the family and the family has to take a little bit of a back seat for that moment in time. And yeah, it absolutely comes at a cost. And that was probably one of the bigger low points that I had was when we actually had a conversation. And I think she actually said, so I can't count on you for anything, can I? And I said, no. And that's just one of those conversations where you have it and then you just kind of sit in the moment and be like, I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth, but they couldn't have been more true. It's just what the moment required. And I think fast forward to when you're transitioning out, those are the things that you got to unpack because they just don't go away. You have to figure out, I mean, it's a very deliberate process. And one I'm actively going through right now of trying to figure out how to take those things back out of her, you know, off her plate and be a functional member of the family and not a spectator. And that's been very intentional. I'm not
So
there yet.
I would assume that during those times of separation and what you're describing, that there were probably two prevailing thoughts, one from her and one from you. The one from her, as much as she might have known what she was getting into, resentment had to creep in. And for you, as much as you might have known, okay, I am swearing this allegiance to both, which I want to dive into here in a minute. There had to have been just a feeling of guilt and failure. I mean, and you know, the failure because this, you know, I wrote it down because it struck me, this ultimate allegiance to both. It's not possible, you know, and
You've sworn that you would die for both.
But yet you can't do, and that's the struggle it's kind of like, and if I were to translate this to the business world and somebody says, well, they have a dual reporting line. Okay, let's keep it simple and keep the bullets and the potential of death out of it. They have a dual reporting line. Well, that's like saying, mom's telling you to go clean your room, dad's telling you to cut the grass, and they both want it done now. I'm in a no-win situation. And
it's in constant conflict. Yeah.
And so you probably dealt with that day in and day out. And your wife, I'm sure there was a lot of resentment.
100%. And I'm really, I'm blessed beyond measure to have a patient and resilient family. I married way above my pay grade, Todd. I did, but those are
Most
things.
Most of us do, Jeff. Most of us do.
We're having those conversations now, and they're hard. They're very difficult. They're uncomfortable, but I can't tell you how thankful I am that we are having those conversations, that we're still around to have those conversations. So many of my, peers, they're on their second or third marriage. So there is extreme resentment. She's vocalized that. And it's one of those things where you have to just take the time to acknowledge the moment for what it is. You can't gloss over it. And the days of glossing over things like what you would do on a 7,000-mile phone call, you can kind of gloss over some things because you know what, you got to pick your battles on what you have on a limited phone call, but there's definitely resentment there, and rightfully so. I wasn't there. So, she had to be a single parent for longer than she ever could have imagined. And yes, there's tremendous guilt on my part because again, when you're living in that constant, conflict of, hey, ultimate allegiance, somebody's going to lose. And you hate the fact that, that according to Uncle Sam, it's going to be your family. And we thank them for their service. And we tell them how they're, the spouses are the backbone of everything. And we couldn't do it without them and whatnot. It's really, really hard to look around a room of people that are saying those things and realize that half of them don't actually know what all that means, to what depth you're talking about. And that's the challenge of again, in this transition process of coming to a community that there's no base right here, so there's not a lot of people, precious few, that actually know what this life is like. And so you gotta unpack it day by day. But I think the biggest thing is transparency. We have found that a lot of candor and ultimate transparency and just keeping those communication lines open is what keeps us here. And it's tough, but we're here.
Well, and I applaud you for it because I do know it's tough. In fact, I've got a buddy who just transitioned out of the intel side. As a matter of fact, he started off, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
He was enlisted, and then he became an officer in the Marine Corps, and he was infantry, and then transitioned over to the intel side, and that's where he finished up. So, and he doesn't live too far from you. So I'm going to have to put you guys together when it's all said and done, because
I love it.
They just transitioned about, golly, inside the last 6 months, just moved. So, well, okay. So what about from the kids' perspective? I mean, when they're not able to see dad for Thanksgiving, and yet here they are, you talked about your Catholic faith, and I'm assuming you raised your children Catholic as well. And, here they are giving thanks for who knows what, but yet they don't even have their dad home to give thanks. Have any of them expressed that confusion to you?
Oh yeah. So I think we're seeing those phases of kind of processing all of this just play out in real time now. There's the initial phase of, hey, everybody just don't say anything bad around dad because he's finally here, so let's not say anything to scare him off again. And then I'm assuming what's coming is hey, you know what, that wasn't cool. Like how did you pick the Army over us all those times? And starting to get there with one of them. Actually, one of the four has already started to go there, and it's actually been a very healthy conversation. It hasn't been contentious or anything, but she has definitely expressed like, hey, that math is not working out in my head yet. Like how you chose that over us. And she no less committed, understands, to the extent she can of why it was necessary. But that conversation is still playing out, and I welcome it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of those things coming my way. I've got a lot of personal things to unpack over that many years, whatnot. That again, at the end of the day, you got to keep talking. You got to just keep vocalizing it and acknowledging those moments. Hey, that moment sucked. There's no way to dice it. There's no lipstick you can put on that pig. That thing, it just sucked. And we just have to acknowledge it. Okay, so now what are we going to do about it? And then you have to figure out a way forward.
But you know what? I've been drilling down on that part, Jeff. But if I kind of go back to the Travis Mannion attitude. If not me, then who? And yeah, it's difficult. I know it is. I mean, I was never married while deployed. I was never in the situation that you were in, but God, I feel like I know it upside down and backwards. I'm asking a lot of really, pointed questions, but at the end of the day, it's got to be done. And, I think as resentful as families can be, getting them to understand, hey, we all have our chosen lots in life, and some of it's fair and some of it's not. Mm-hmm. And that's really, when someone says to me, thank you for your service, when someone says to me, man, that's got to be a tough life. You know what? Why don't you go ask somebody about that?
Yeah.
Because it might actually motivate you to do a little bit more than say thank you. And there's nothing that's not intended to be a dig at anyone. But, it's kind of like, I asked a friend of mine, what do you say to somebody when they say, God, I wish I would have done this or that. Yeah. And he always says, it's this simple, these words, there's still time, so, I didn't necessarily mean to get on that soapbox, but I can see where there could be some challenges, but you know what? I applaud you. I applaud your family. Y'all did things for this country as a family that some people, you don't understand the sacrifice until it's way behind you. And it sounds like that's where the kids are getting to.
They are, and they haven't been shy about telling me how many birthdays. Every one of them can tell you a running count of how many birthdays were missed and these various holidays. And they have a better memory of a lot of these things. God bless my wife. She was really, really great, is great about making lemonade out of some serious lemon situations. And so she found ways to include. We got pictures of a doll dressed up in my clothes with a balloon head and whatnot, and a drink in his hand that she made or whatever, because they were all having a big family celebration and they were missing me. And so they made a doll, and that was the Jeff. So they would come over occasionally in the night and toast with Jeff, to whatever they were doing. And it just finding any way they could to try to include you and try to just honor what it was that you were missing. And they knew why. She comes from a long line of service herself. Her dad had 30-something years of service in the Air Force. So in many ways, she had a longer active duty tour than I did, because her dad was still on active duty when we got married. And so my retirement was actually the first day of her life that she was not, actually connected to the active service. And
wow.
Yeah. So unbelievable contributions there as a
wow.
Jeff,
that's crazy. Hold on. I gotta dig into that for a minute, because
it hit me too.
So you're saying she was born, her dad was on active duty. He was on active duty until the day that you guys got married. You were on active duty at that point. And so, she's, certainly in her 40s at this point. Not that I want to dime your wife's age out or anything. So she's had a longer, easy. So she's had a longer active duty stint than both you and her father. That is amazing. And that's one, I'm telling you, that's one of those things that people just don't understand. You know, if you think it, again, we used to say, if you think it's hard being a Marine, try being a Marine's wife.
There you go.
And the same holds true for, you know, for you, especially with your wife. That is, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's funny. Knowing these little bits and pieces, you know, about us, she and I used to have a little running phrase that we would say often, and it was just kind of our own little insider, our little insider code. But we would go to various duty stations or assignments or whatnot. We had a kind of a running phrase, and we would come back, and shortly after arriving, it would be like, "Hey, these are our peeps, or these are not our people." And you could quickly tell, like, "Hey, are we surrounded anywhere close? Like, is there anyone around that actually gets us and understands what a day in our life is like?" And so that was kind of our little code for, hey, are we in a place where we're going to have to just kind of do this on our own? Because most everybody around, well-intentioned, but they're going to be oblivious to what an actual day in our life looks like. Or do we have a network of people around here who actually been there and done that, and they know? That was one of the beautiful things about being there in North Carolina. Our neighborhood was absolutely a godsend, because the neighbors all got it, because they were from the same organizations and communities, and had grown up with that, and the kids all understood. Didn't make it any easier for the actual sacrifice of, hey, dad's gone this time, but everybody looked out after everybody, because you always knew who was on what rotation, and if somebody got a call in the middle of the night, it's like the rest of the guys picked up the slack, because chances are you didn't all get the same call, so yeah, you just worked it. But there were definitely times where we were around our people and times where we were not.
So from your time in service,
Mhm.
whether at home or abroad, is there anything in particular, any specific instance that really stands out to you to this day that you continue to find yourself dwelling on or reflecting back to, that, just good, bad, right, wrong, it sticks with you, and you still draw memories from that experience?
Yeah. So I'm probably still unpacking a lot of those various instances. I mean, my big thing is I got a whole string of near misses. So, you get back and you finally finish that retirement ceremony, and then you wonder, like, hey, how did I make it here? Because you start reflecting back on the I guess the slide reel of all those times where it was this close to getting you for whatever reason. And so those are things that I think I'm still unpacking. Fortunately, what I'm dealing with these days, and what I'm taking with me, and what I'm really dwelling on, is actually a lot more of the positive experiences and what that means for my future. You kind of get the lessons learned, I guess, is, the AAR, the after action report. You kind of start doing those things and figuring out, hey, what did I take away from this experience? And I tell you, I was really blessed to be around some of the most amazing non-commissioned officers that a guy could ever wish for in any career. And actually, I was thinking about one of these the other day, and it kind of hit me because of the holidays, and a lot of people have tough times during the holidays and whatnot. There was a sergeant major that I was serving with forward out there in the Middle East, and on one of these particular tours. And man, she had a resume a mile long. She was just one of the most uber competent leaders I had ever been around, and just soft leader, never pushing, never demanding, but man, you just wanted to be your best, when you were around her, and any organization she had a role in. And I had some leadership position, but she saw that I was trying to juggle all the balls, and there was just too many. And I'll never forget it. She came up and she kind of, hey, what's going on, sir? How's everything going? And I think she saw that I was spinning my wheels. I knew she saw it, and couldn't hide that from her. And she said, you can't juggle all the balls. Nobody can. And I almost looked at her with a little bit of, disdain, like, how in the world can you tell me that I'm not going to juggle all these balls? By God, I'm going to figure it out, and I'll show you, type of thing. And she's like, nobody figures out how to juggle all the balls. The art And the true lesson and the true skill is to identify the rubber balls from the glass balls. And she's like, because the glass ones, they'll break and you need to do something about them right now, whatever it takes. The rubber ones, they'll still be bouncing tomorrow. And I tell you, I cannot tell you how much that has stuck with me over the years, because it really speaks to, whether it's transition stresses, whether it's, stresses of a deployment, whether it's family stuff. I can't tell you how many, junior officers or junior NCOs that I've talked to, over the past, couple of years that I have passed that along to. I'm like, man, I just think one of the ultimate skills you can get, spend a lot working on trying to perfect is picking your battles. And that really speaks to that, is just how important it is to always be looking and identify the rubber balls from the glass balls, because she couldn't be more right. You can't do a thing about all of them, but you can do something about the glass ones.
So did you have trouble discerning the glass balls from the rubber balls right away?
Your trouble is when you convince yourself. I mean, it's a self-inflicted filter. Your problem is you've convinced yourself that you somehow, if you just try harder, and as guys, it's always brute force as our go-to, reaction, that you can figure out how to juggle them all. And in reality, there's not that many hours in the day. So it teaches you prioritization. And it was one of those lessons that when you hear it, it's profound. And when you go back to your bunk that night, when you finally get off shift at 3 or so in the morning, and you're sitting there, you're like, man, that was more profound than I thought it was. And it sticks with you.
So obviously one of the big things that we have to do, whether it be militarily, leadership role, family, sometimes you got more glass balls to juggle, or, glass plates keep spinning, whatever,
Yep.
metaphor you want to use. Then what? Did you ask her how you do that?
I could only handle one profound nugget for that night. So we had follow-on conversations about that, but it's just something that's definitely stuck with me over the years and it's come in handy.
And so my assumption would be that you've been able to use that with the kids and pass that on to them. And, hey, here's a great lesson I learned from someone I least expected to learn it from, because, you were the officer, granted she's a sergeant, but you're the officer, she's enlisted. You're supposed to know all that stuff, but yet,
I ditched that mentality long, long ago. I cannot tell you, I can't overstate the professionalism of the NCOs that we had working with us in that community. I really can't. And, coming from the enlisted side, there was more than one occasion when I thought about going back to the NCO ranks, just because I had such an unbelievable respect for them. And there's 1,000 of those lessons that I was given along the way, that I was just privileged to kind of be around somebody who just looked over and was like, hey man, looks like you're struggling. So what's up? And they're just care enough to give you a tip that, somebody passed on to them. And they're hard fought tips. They came from a real honest place, but they work.
So I do love that. You have to be able to decipher the rubber balls from the glass balls. But I'll tell you another, takeaway, for me from that story is that, the humility with which you approached it, I think is extremely important, because, like I said, it's real easy to look at it and go, hey, I'm the officer here. You're you're enlisted. I think, what I take away from it is you're never too accomplished. You're never too high on the scale, if you will, the totem pole, to learn something from someone else. And, that to me is, one of the things that I learned through, at some point, somebody taught me the importance of going, as an officer, as a lieutenant, of going and when that, young Lance Corporal is on their saw gun, and for people who aren't familiar with that, who are watching this, it's a light machine, but it's the backbone of the Marine Corps fire team and squad. And those guys slept with that weapon. They knew that weapon inside and out better than anybody else. And one of the lessons that I was taught is go lay down in the mud next to that Lance Corporal who's watching his field of fire and ask him questions about how best to employ his weapon. Because you know what? He's going to know better than you will.
100%. That's all he does. He's got one purpose at that moment of life. And yes, I was asked a question once, I don't know, a job interview, as I was, going to other units, and they said, what happens if, how would you approach the situation if somebody who was a lower rank had the best idea? I was like, well, you take the idea. And they're like, well, why would you do that? Because you're supposed to come out of that. You're the officer. And I was like, that's not how I keep my pulse. I'm like, if you're in a situation when you where lives matter, you go with the best idea. I don't care who it came from. And I was, again, very fortunate to cross over to that.
And then you praise them for coming up with that idea.
It's not true teamwork if one person thinks he's always running this stuff. I mean, that's not a team. That's a forced march, and that's not what you're really about. You have to rely on everybody's strengths. And I was very fortunate that my first experience in the special operations side of the house was early on. And I'll tell you, that was a hard, violent experience, being jumped into that gang in that side of the house. But it's where I learned all those things. And it's really where I started that education, and that the soft side of the house, they raised me. So
in the intel community, what, give somebody a little insight into what you did every day, especially when you're deployed.
So, I mean, as an intel guy, you're just supposed to know, your main focus is the enemy threat. What is the enemy doing? What's he going to do? And so on this side of the house, you're often assigned to a project or a team or something where you're a dedicated support mechanism for whoever that happens to be. It may be a team that's been given a certain mission, and we need a dedicated guy. We don't need to get in line for any intel updates. We need our own dedicated person that's their only purpose in life is to focus on this one threat for this period of time until we finish this job. And so that's often how it was. You would be on a subject area or a team or a project, and you would be supporting that. Other times you could be on a basically like an on-call rotational thing, where again, getting those calls in the middle of the night. Hey, somewhere in the world, something bad's happening. We're sending somebody in there to do something about it. And you've got to go in, and there's people that stay back and support and let everybody know kind of how those threats are unfolding. And then there's people that go forward with them and do that with them on the ground. So it really is one of those unique positions where you can do anything on any given day. I had a friend that got on a plane with a bunch of SOF operators and thought he was going to be just supporting them right up to the moment, until one guy walked up to him and started putting on a harness. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, you're going with us. He's like, well, what are you talking about? And that guy found himself on a halo jump that night, getting jumped into the middle of the ocean, because it's like, hey, I need you with us, and I can't wait for a response. So you're coming with us. And so every day is a new day.
Every day's a day. Well, so what are you doing now you've retired?
Oh, I got a great job with a security consulting firm. Honestly, I joined kind of my old tribe here. So I've got a good friend from back in the day that I used to work with, and we're friends from way back, and we just got together to have coffee. Honestly, actually, it was actually during the internship there I had with Carry the Load, and it was just trying to do some networking and set down some roots here. And I noticed that he had moved to this area with his job. And so I just tried to touch base with him and catch up with an old friend, and we met for coffee. And halfway through the catch up session there, he said, you know what, I think you might need to join our team. And they happened to be building and scaling some capabilities, and I had some experience scaling new things that were kind of on the hadn't been done before. So he's like, I think that's what we need. So one thing led to another, and I ended up joining their team. So the security industry is fun. It's close to my heart. Obviously, I've done a decent amount of that piece, but more importantly, I got to join a really good culture. It's such a a veteran-centric team. A huge percentage of their workforce is veterans, and they pride themselves on being a second home for veterans that want to be around the same people, because we always miss the right.
Oh, absolutely.
You can hand off the mission to somebody else, but you really miss the people. And so we found a place where we can be around the people and preserve that culture and all the things that we hold dear with that culture. But yeah, it's in the private security industry.
So what are you thinking about the civilian life now that you've transitioned, and you guys are living in McKinney, which is a great town, but not everybody understands the type of lifestyle that you guys just y'all are used to just sliding into a new base, and everybody's sliding in and out, so it's not that big a deal. Are you having fun? Are you meeting people out there?
We are. I tell you, the biggest thing we're doing is pacing ourselves. We're not on any timeline. We're just trying to set some roots down. We made plans for this a long time ago, but now it's here. And so there's a difference in talking about it and actually doing it. So the community could not have been better. They've been super open arms for all of us. I've had lots of friends. Carry the Load was a huge enabler of that. Debbie could not have been better about opening up the Rolodex to just introduce me to this community, and reintroduce me rather, having grown up 60 miles north of here. But it's just been great to get back home. I'm struck by how much it's changed, in those 20 something years that I was gone. But no, it's been great. I think the big thing is we're get a place for everybody. I don't know what the future holds and what this next phase of our life is going to look like. And, my wife has had such a start and stop career path because of, moving around with our assignments, and those experiences they have to, sometimes they can look a little sporadic on a resume. So, we're really looking forward to her being able to take off running with her career. Finally, she's doing an MBA program right now. And that's a long time coming. So we're really just taking a moment to enjoy it for all the things that it is and all the opportunities that we have now that we're not having to worry about that next duty assignment.
Well, you tell your wife if she needs some kind of work, all the stuff that she was doing, I'm a phone call away. I will find something for her in a heartbeat. She's earned it.
I appreciate that, Todd.
Well, one of the things about Carry the Load, as you well know, is that, we want to make sure that we keep the memories alive of so many people that unfortunately don't have the ability to deal with the problems that, that you've talked about today. And I'm sure at the end of the day, we know they wish they could. So would you share with us one of those people that you're carrying with you?
I was thinking about, actually, I was thinking about 4 of them today, in particular for various reasons. But the first loss I ever had of a military colleague, one of my 10th group teammates, was Kelly Hornbeck, and he was the team sergeant for an SF ODA. They're an operational detachment alpha, and fast forward that it just unfortunately got to be more and more common. The guys that you lost, but people like Will Rudd, people like Josh Wheeler, Eric Emond. These are people that I think about often for various reasons, and again, back kind of how things went and why they went the way they did. But those are guys I think about all the time.
Well, that's awesome. And Jeff, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the hardships that you and your wife are dealing with, and sharing your scars like that is no easy feat, but it's important for so many others to be able to learn from it. So I look forward to seeing you again down the road, and hopefully not at a controlled dinner where we can just kind of sit back and tip one back and just kind of get to know one another better. So Jeff Chase, thank you for all you've done for this country. Thank you for all your family has done for this country, and please give them my best. So for everybody else out there, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks with John Hill, who has a very, very interesting story. And Jeff, I think you remember meeting John the same night that I did.
I do.
His story is actually it's interesting because a movie was made out of the story that he's going to share with us. So For all of you, thanks for joining us. And as a reminder, always, always, always have a very good answer to this question. Who are you carrying?